They could have done that. I would have been fine with that. They didn't do any fact checking. So like there's a major breach of ethics, both on Anna Kasparian's part and Cenk Uygur, in that sense, about checking with the sources of the knowledge. As I said in my piece, like this, not all stories are confirmable, but very few stories are this confirmable. They weren't interested in telling their audience the truth, because the truth would have meant they would have had to talk about the reasons their workers unionized. And that would show that Cenk Uygur does not live his principles at all. After 9 days of silence, the company formally rejected voluntary recognition, saying they were prepared to voluntarily recognize the union, but only after a second election was conducted on terms more favorable to the company. While they wanted people to believe they were protecting the democratic will of the workers, it was in fact, as labor journalist Sarah Jones pointed out, classic union busting. Every single tactic was a tried and true technique for disrupting solidarity, save one: publicly smearing the workers' integrity, intelligence, and motivations by accusing them of being in a conspiracy with Cenk Uygur's political opponent.
But really appreciate everybody tuning in, taking the time to watch. We have a really important live stream. A lot of people, they may ask, why are you guys just, nitpicking constantly at the Young Turks? It doesn't dawn on them that we have 50,000 subscribers. They have 6 million subscribers. But what the real meat and potato is that they're not a progressive company. They do not walk a progressive walk. We're going to get into all of that and more. And we're going to hear it from someone who lived it, somebody who believed in the mission that the Young Turks were selling, right? So many people in our own audience, Gavin, I believe yourself included at one point, you were there for the heyday of the Young Turks. I really kind of got it when they were circling the drain. I kind of got it when I was like, oh, wow, there were some real bright moments from Cenk here and there. Or, wow, Anna actually did sound like a leftist at one point 5 years ago, right? I had some of those brief instances with the brand, but I never bought into their progressive movement. The fact that they were going to take over mainstream media, the fact that they were going to be an alternative that actually rivaled the likes of CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, right? That was the mission. And a lot of people donated their hard-earned money. A lot of people became members. A lot of people spent in a way that they would not have spent on just a regular for-profit media company because of the lie that the Young Turks were telling them. But do you have anything else that you'd like to set the table with, Gavin? You're the resident TYT expert over here.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of TYT, or I was a big fan of TYT, going back to 2015, 2016. And I'm not going to lie, man. I mean, back in that period of my life, I never thought I would be able to build a progressive independent media show in the way that we have. I dreamed of working for the Young Turks. Back in that time, I was like, I can't imagine a more cool job than working for TYT. I mean, it seemed like a genuinely progressive company. It seemed like such a good work environment. You guys remember how awesome the vibes used to be over at the Young Turks. But the more we find out about the state of affairs behind the scenes at TYT, the more I think back to that dream of mine, back in high school. And I'm like, thank God I didn't go that route. Thank God I never actually tried to work for TYT, because as you guys are about to find out, very, very unfortunate conditions at the Young Turks. And we have our friend of the show, Hank Thompson, that's going to be joining our stream very quickly here to discuss some of those damning details. I think it's probably a good place to start this conversation by just showing the audience a couple minutes of Hank's documentary, where he gets into these allegations and gets into exposing some of this behavior, this anti-worker behavior from a supposedly progressive company. Do you think that's a good place to start, Zach?
Absolutely. I'm really excited to watch the first couple of minutes with everybody. Hank does an excellent job editing together this story, really revealing it from, again, a worker POV, right? A lot of times when you read these stories, you're getting it from somebody who didn't live it. You're getting it from somebody who doesn't know what it's like to be on the bottom side of these negotiation tables. And for as much as Cenk postures as like an anti-Trump guy, somebody who just rabidly hates Donald Trump, I want you to pay attention to the similarities in business tactics that you're going to hear about, not just in this first 4 minutes of the clip that we play, but throughout our entire discussion with Hank, because you can see that at the baseline of how businesses function, it's all corrupt. It's all pernicious. It's all nefarious. And bottom line is exploitation of workers. But super excited to see the intro to this documentary from Hank.
On February 12, 2020, a group of workers at the Young Turks came forward with a union.
This Twitter page pops up out of nowhere, right? And it's TYT Union.
They'd used card check, an election process in which 50%, I mean, if 50, little help, Bernie.
if 50% of workers in a bargaining unit plus one sign a card saying they want to join a union, they will have a union. End of discussion. End of discussion.
End of discussion.
Fine. End of relationship.
After 9 days of silence, the company formally rejected voluntary recognition, saying they were prepared to voluntarily recognize the union, but only after a second election was conducted on terms more favorable to the company. While they wanted people to believe they were protecting the democratic will of the workers, it was in fact, as labor journalist Sarah Jones pointed out, classic union busting. Their statement was, put another way, total
bullshit.
What followed was a period of union busting that seemed right out of the union busting playbook. Every single tactic was a tried and true technique for disrupting solidarity, save one: publicly smearing the workers' integrity, intelligence, and motivations by accusing them of being in a conspiracy with Cenk Uygur's political opponent. I didn't misspeak. They accused their own workers of being part of a plot to disrupt Cenk Uygur's political ambitions. What makes this unique is that most CEOs desperate to avoid a union are not talk show host politicians like Cenk Uygur. So this tactic stands out and is the subject of this video. The other tactics, all documented in these 4 articles, none of which the company has refuted, might seem so familiar because, as NLRB filings would later reveal, the Young Turks hired 2 anti-worker management-side law and consultancy firms. Since the home of progressives is largely member-funded, it stands to reason that the audience deserves to know how much they spent on union busting, if any. How much member money did TYT send to these anti-worker law firms? Do they even have a right to know? Perhaps not. Shh. Best not talk about it.
Yeah. And guys, that's, I think, the best place for us to cut in. We might watch a little bit more of this, but what a damning revelation, right? It's not just the Cenk Uygur said, I don't know, is this a good idea? We're kind of a small company, guys. Is it smart for us to have a union? That's how he'll portray it. That's how his defenders will portray it. But as you can see in that documentary, no, they literally went out there, hired an anti-worker firm, the sort of firm that corporations specifically bring in to bust unions and to screw over workers. And they probably used TYT donation money to do it. They probably used your guys' hard-earned member and donation money.
100% they used their donation, guys. They explicitly took the money that you gave them to fight back against mainstream media tactics. That was their entire branding, right? Gavin and I always make fun of that kind of branding, like join the revolution, join the vanguard, smash the like button. That's praxis, right? Like, but TYT, they really believed it. They really, sold their audience on it wholeheartedly. And now they're just walking it all back with their terrible, terrible practice. Also, I want to give a massive shout out to Hank for the work that he did as a documentarian, as an editor. That gave me serious Michael Moore energy in a way that we don't see enough of nowadays. And it really outrages me that instead of using a guy like Hank's ability, instead of uplifting him and making him, have a bounty of opportunities at the Young Turks, which is a place that could really use some lively video editing like that.
Do you think it's a good time to introduce Hank to the live stream, Zach?
Absolutely. What's up, Hank? How you doing, man? Thank you for taking the time today.
Hello, boy. I almost called you lads. Sorry. Hello, boys. Hello, Vanguard friends. Thank you for having me on today. It's really wonderful to hear all those kind things you've been saying. Yeah, appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, one thing that you mentioned in your video that I think a lot of people outside of the working, organizing field individuals might not have been familiar with is union cards, right? You played the clip from Bernie Sanders where he talks about if 51% of workers sign a union card. I want everybody to know that is the industry standard, whatever kind of industry you're in, right? I want to be kind of vague. the World Cup is coming to Kansas City, right? I work in the service industry. There is a tremendous effort from to unionize a lot of the bars and restaurants and hospitality workers around town, so they don't face like a wave of exploitation as all these rich assholes come and book out hotels for weeks and weeks, and they, you know, get fired if they get overworked and they can't come for their 5th shift in a row, and they've all been 10 hours plus. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, I get, okay, we'll never come back, right? You want to make sure that you have a union in place to prevent that. If you're a carpenter, any of it, if you organize whatever you do, I guarantee you, most likely you're going to sign a union card at some point, right? And typically, if you are a progressive organization, even if you're just a mom and pop shop that wants to do the right thing, you'll be like, you know what, guys, let's negotiate. Because the first thing they'll tell you during union negotiations, if you're an owner or a proprietor of a business, is, hey, we only make a living if you make a living too. We're not here to put you out of business. We want this place to grow. We're looking for job security, just like you're looking for job security. We can be a team together and make this grow faster and better than we ever could if we didn't have an organized system together, because you're going to have all of your employees ready to rock because they've been involved and they're speaking on behalf of it. But I wondered if you could talk about how the early stages of that went at the Young Turks.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you saw me. I don't know. I held this up. This is the union card I would have signed to join this union here. I just happened to have this over here in my little section. You know, it's got IATSE right there on the back of it. So like this would have been how I participated in that election. We didn't get these cards like early in the process. So the origination of the union at the Young Turks started actually in 2018. So if we can kind of go back to the very beginning, the timeline that Cenk wants his audience to believe is that the union started after he became a politician in November of 2019, right? So we have 2 competing versions going on. The one I'm telling and the one Cenk told his audience. That's the kind of crux of this whole project, is that I lived an entirely different story, right? So I just a little background for brand new people. I worked at TYT in 2013, off like throughout 2015. Then I was on Jimmy Dore in 2016 as a co-host, and I was the pre-Ron Placone guy, and then back to TYT in 2018. Just I think it's important people know I have kind of a deep history with the company too. Just like Gavin, I was watching the show way back in the early days and thought, oh my God, what if working there? It must be like one of the few places in the world where the boss is awesome because it's that guy or something. Not that I expected, like, you know, I almost said golden showers. That would be a weird expectation, but like, not like, right. So anyway, back to the timeline part though. Due to a completely set of different working conditions that I'm not involved with, because I had been kind of off and on with TYT. So this is while I wasn't there in 2018. Some workers reached out to IATSE. That was the first contact with the union. So that's the initiation of the organizing attempt. Then there was a round of firings in that summer that was written about in the wrap. I have this detailed on my Substack posts. And then, so the workers kind of got shy about the union and they stopped. I end up back at the company in 2018 as a full-time video editor. And the first thing I have to do to get the job is sign an independent contractor agreement saying that I won't get any benefits. I won't be considered an employee. Here's your rate. It's a long, thing. I was pretty desperate. I was having a hard time.
Really takes over the industry. They're not doing anything to disrupt that. They're just feeding right into the MSNBC or mainstream media kind of tactics of, we don't want to full-time retain anybody. We don't want to give anybody benefits. We just want to exploit them and take their good ideas when they're there.
More or less, yeah. I mean, that's kind of how it felt. I was, and like the people I worked alongside as full-time video editors were regular employees. So they were classified differently than me. The person whose role I was filling, like they were changing their role in the company. That's why they need me to come in. They were a full-time employee. So on Friday, it was a full-time employee job with benefits. I show up on Monday. It's now called an independent contractor's job. I'm desperate. I need the job. I need work. It was good. It was work I was good at. I knew roughly half the people who worked there, so I was like glad for that. It was the easiest job interview in the world. The guy that called me knew me, said, "Hey man, you want to start Monday?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. What, okay." Boom. And off we go. I was okay. I would have been okay if that was like 2 months or so, or like a month or two. And then they brought me on for full-time for benefits. That would have been shady, but that would have been, whatever, we're all conditioned to be, give up even more blood to the masters as much as they can take. But it just didn't end. It just kept going. And I was like, am I really working for Cenk Uygur for no benefits? I'm doing full-time video editing on like regular shows. I was editing Aggressive Progressive with Jimmy Dore, Brett Ehrlich, Happy Half Hour with Brett Ehrlich. I did a lot of fill-in editing for the main show with Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian. I edited a bunch of some of Hassan's breakdown videos, but also I was the primary on Francis Maxwell's Hassan's videos. the Scottish Hassan, as we all like to call him. I just made that up. That's I don't think anybody's ever said that. So I'm kind of a loud, annoying person with bad boundary detection. So I'm complaining constantly.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, exactly. The word neurodivergence has entered my lexicon in the last few years, and I understand autism and ADHD far more deeply than I ever did. Anyway, so like I'm just like, this is wrong. Like, what the hell? I'm not okay with this. This feels like you're crossing. This isn't just like job kind of sucks. It's more just like, this is a major ethical boundary violation. Like, what the hell's going on here? So I finally get a meeting with the HR department. And so I decided that I had heard about that union situation, by the way, just to keep the timeline here. We're in the spring of 2019. Remember, Cenk's not a politician yet. Nobody knows he's going to run for Congress. Okay, he was inspired by George Papadopoulos, by the way. I heard someone say that in an interview, because George, like, there was news that that George Papadopoulos was jumping in on that special election to replace Katie Hill, against establishment favorite Christy Smith. So anyway, I'm thinking, I got to do something about this. Like, clearly Cenk isn't interested in giving me health care, pay days off, bonus participate, any benefits at all. I'm out thousands
he preaches every single day. One of the things that drives Gavin and I mad is the thought of hiring somebody and then not being able to give them like the same exact kind of treatment that we give each other, right? Because we take really good care of each other. Obviously, we're besties, but you know what I mean? The idea of having a third person, and then it's like, okay, now it's time to really practice what you preach. Like, you have to make sure that you're able to support and sustain them. You know what I mean? And the idea of just having somebody on, what's it, I-9 or whatever the fucking tax filing it is, where you're just an independent contractor. It's horseshit, and it's taken over every single industry. When I worked in Chicago, when I was 18, I could barely feed myself because I was getting paid like $9 an hour as a contractor doing, rental house work for film equipment and stupid shit like that. And then at the end of the year, you get like $800 that you owe in taxes. You barely survived.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. You busting your ass for somebody who's making money off your labor, and then they're squeezing you at every bit of it, and then and the stress that comes with that too. This extra like energy burn you have to do to just deal with the disrespect and the stress of it all. So anyway, so like I had heard about this previous attempt to start the union a year ago, so I knew we had a contact at it with IATSE. And so in my brain, because I'm kind of a different, I fight back, like I'm not just going to sit there and take it kind of person. So I'm like, I'm going to see what I can do. I'm going to decide to start talking about the union to my coworkers. Me and the other editors were all really close because we kind of had to know each other's jobs incredibly well. We were actually a very, very like highly skilled team. We all like really quite liked each other, which is something you would love to get in any company, the kind of solidarity where people are good at each other's jobs, not just good at their own jobs, but good at each other's jobs. And of course, Cenk didn't show the kind of workplace where he would show any respect towards that dynamic. But so I start bringing it up, and right around that same time, I get a meeting with HR, and I express my concerns about the company. I'm like, hey man, this is like, isn't this bad for your own brand and your own reputation? That seems really risky. Why are you doing, like, why would you take, like, it's not like you're saving that much money. It's thousands of dollars to me. It's a lot of money in my world, but how much is this really saving you? And also just like fairness, just basic human decency. Like, don't I deserve to go to a doctor? I work for Cenk. I do full-time video editing at the Young Turks. Is this not appropriate?
Crazy that you have to ask for that.
Yeah, right. But I was also kind of hoping, okay, fine, paperwork mistake. Hey, Hank, we screwed up. You brought it to our attention. We're so sorry it went on so long. Here's a bunch of money. Here's all the holidays you didn't get paid. Here's a big check for all the shit we didn't pay you. I would have been like, yeah, you f***ed over, but at least you made it right when I called you out, and now that's good. That skeleton would have stayed buried, as I wrote in one of my Substacks. But instead, their answer was, we're going to change this. We're going to change your classification from a 1099 independent contractor, make you a W-2 employee, but we're going to call you part-time. So then from then on, I was called a part-time employee working at TYT.
So they don't have to give you health care.
Still no health care, still no paid days off, still no bonus participation. I got auto-enrolled in the company 401k program, which means I just got dinged like $5 or $10 of my own money into some stupid account that I cashed and with zero employer contributions. So I guess technically that was a benefit. It was just ridiculous. And so like, instead of saying, dude, we made a mistake, we'll fix it, they said, we're going to change the classification to part-time and you're going to work I still work full-time. I work like 40-hour weeks. That's all proven in the latest Substack that I posted recently.
Was that hourly or salary, Hank?
Hourly. Yeah. Hourly.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well,
you guys,
another interesting...
You froze for a second.
Oh, we good?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Another aspect of this that I wanted to ask you about, and that I think we should play a little bit more footage from your documentary in order to fully discuss and have the context for, is this crazy conspiracy theory that somehow the effort to unionize TYT was an attempt to interfere with Cenk Uygur's congressional campaign, a congressional campaign which ended in the most embarrassing, miserable fashion imaginable after being hyped up more than just about any congressional campaign of, online at least, just to end with such a dismal, I think, 4 or 5%?
Less than 5%.
Less than 5%. And again, this was something that Cenk really convinced people that he had a shot of winning. Like, this is serious. I'm a big online commentator. At the time, I was fully convinced, even as someone that was starting to, my appreciation for TYT was admittedly starting to fade by that point. I still thought, hey, Cenk Uygur is a pretty big name. He's one of the most popular online commentators. He's been around for a long time. This guy could seriously get into Congress. That did not happen, obviously, which makes this whole episode all the more embarrassing, because it's like, really, you think in retrospect that people were trying to unionize your business to prevent you from winning a race that you clearly never had the ability to win in the first place?
Christy Smith didn't even have the ability to win it in the first place.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, so before we get some more context and insight, Hank, I wanted to take a little bit more of this documentary in because I think you do such a great job kind of, explaining some of what happened in this regard. So everyone sit tight while we take in a little bit more of Hank's documentary. And just a heads up, also, I've put it in the chat a few times. I'll do it one more time. The link to the entire documentary piece, which, like I said, all of you guys have to watch in its entirety. We're not going to sit here and watch it all in today's stream. You guys need to check this out. You guys need to watch it on your own time as soon as this show's over. But let's take a look.
18 months later, Cenk Uygur described his own union busting as merely a bumpy start.
Our relationship got off to a bumpy start in the beginning.
He almost succeeded in denying his workers, the very people on whose time, talent, and labor his career is built, their right to collectively organize. But after a tense few months, a second election was held, and bravo, a new union was born. After 18 months of negotiation, a contract was ratified. The union was official. Congratulations to my friends and comrades. Time for coffee cake. Hi, I'm Hank. I worked at TYT as well as for the Jimmy Dore Show in various iterations over the years. I was a long-time paying member before I began working for the company in 2013. As a video editor and lizard massager, I was on the ground floor of this organizing drive. Our efforts began in early summer of 2019, away from the watchful eyes of managers, of course, eventually leading to the first in-person meeting with the IATSE representatives at my apartment one day before work. During that meeting, we felt the long, absent presence of hope and the possibility of one day being respected by our employer. Solidarity was becoming action. It was glorious. As insiders, we knew Cenk wouldn't like the challenge to his power, but nobody expected the guy who built a career telling a camera he supported worker rights to reject a union. Refusing was a total surprise, but the conspiracy charges were simply beyond imagination. All right, come on, let's hop into our 2012 Prius with leather seats and travel back to the day it all hit the fan. February 21st, 2020. The first salvo was launched by the company account in the final sentence of their deceitful statement. The fact that IATSE has failed to respond to TYT, instead opting to issue misleading statements, suggests there are other motives at play.
other motives at play? What could that mean? Having been laid off a month prior, and because I refused to sign the massive NDA upon which my severance was contingent, I laid out a worker's perspective. Unlike TYT, I told the truth. But I have no reach. I'm just a feeble red shirt compared to the stars of this story. Cenk beams in to spread the lie at 12:15 p.m. First, he denies that they had refused voluntary recognition, which is a flat-out lie. He then points out that IATSE had endorsed Kirsty Smith in this race, insinuating that TYT Union was a puppet regime of the establishment forces arrayed against him.
All right, so that's where I feel like we should probably jump back in. As I said, I don't want to spoil too much of this fantastic documentary. I want to keep some surprises for you guys to find out about when you click that link and watch the entirety of it. Hank, it would be a really good thing if this video on Hank's channel keeps building in views. I want it to get to, 30,000, 40,000.
1 million views.
50,000 views. Exactly. I think, what are you at, Hank, right now? About 16K on that documentary? It's
roughly,
wild to me that...
Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
I was just going to say it's wild that more people haven't seen this.
Well, I'm learning how much making a documentary, why they usually, it takes more than one person usually. It's absolutely grinding to do it by yourself when I have some skills I think are pretty good, like the editing stuff. And the promotion and the public relations side of it is not in my wheelhouse. So I'm kind of making a lot of wild swings that my promotional plan is mostly just be really uncomfortable and weird on Twitter, and that'll just make it so that I'm even more unhireable.
Well, I mean, I think the best way that people are going to find out about it, like I said, is just getting that documentary out there.
Yeah.
No matter what you say on Twitter, there's a ton of people on Twitter, but that piece really does speak for itself. And the more you watch it, the more it becomes undeniable. This is not just like, oh, I'm a bitter, ex-employee of TYT who's kind of pissed off, so now I'm going to rant into the camera. Like, you bring the receipts, you bring the evidence. It's pretty undeniable, like I said. But as we talked about, and as we kind of left off with that last clip from the documentary film, it's crazy to me that Cenk tried to tie in his congressional run and act like the attempts to unionize his business was in any way related to an alternative opponent campaign. Yes.
I got a lot to say about that, but I just want to make it clear for people that are going to watch the video. There's two big pieces out right now. So look for the first 46 minutes and the middle 38 minutes. And I've got a final full version on the way that I'm not yet really, I still have a lot of work to do. I'm hoping to do like a fundraiser maybe, because I'm not, I need money. I'm just struggling to pull it together.
We'll talk more about that at the end of the show.
Yeah.
We'll
okay. Good.
You can,
no problem. I just wanted to make sure people understood that it's kind of a work in progress.
For sure.
So yes, the tying it to the political campaign, first of all, okay, so we're formalizing our conversations to do this union, because union conversations could be just like venting gas, and then we're really serious, right? We're like, okay, so we got to email IATSE. So then we get in touch with IATSE, and right around, it was a few weeks before, then Cenk becomes a politician. And of course that changes the way you're going to approach how you might exercise leverage or something like that. But although those discussions didn't really happen until much closer to then, and I was already gone by then, so I wasn't really involved with like public campaign discussions. I get fired in January. At the company, everybody was sort of spun up by the campaign. It created a lot of intensity. It added a whole bunch of extra energy to everybody's job. Anna had to expand her role into, executive producer fully. She took over complete editorial control of the company. That's also detailed in the campaign, or not complete. She shared it with the head of programming, Judith Ben-Ezra. So Cenk had to follow these ethical guidelines as far as maintaining editorial separation from his business operations. He couldn't let his political stuff interfere with his business stuff, because it risks any appearance on his own show then becoming an in-kind campaign contribution, and then you can cross some pretty big ethical boundaries with that stuff. So they made a big showing of how ethical they are about the entire thing. As the campaign went on, I get fired in January. The union comes forward on February 12th, and then the union busting becomes public on February 21st. So that's a key date in this story. That's when things all sort of hit the fan. And that's when we first start seeing, as we just watched in the clip there, they said other motives were at play. And I just was sitting there going, what the fuck? Like, what other motives are you what do they mean? Like, I had a hard time computing that, because I was like, you're talking about me. Like, you're talking about me and my friends. Like, I know what happened. I literally sat here. So you got to think about, like, I'm asking the audience to, like, picture how weird it must have been for me and the other workers in the union to be sitting there watching completely untrue things get sent off from Cenk's Twitter through those TYT statements, and then signal boosted by Anna. And she, you know, from what I could tell, they didn't do any fact checking. There was nobody reached out to me to see what the origination of the union was. And like, one of the things I do in the movie, and as I've done on my Substack articles, is like, I try to make some space for acknowledging how weird this whole situation was overall, right? Like, this guy's running for Congress. It was kind of an impromptu thing. Everybody there was sort of spun up. They had genuinely been receiving the thing that they do to progressives, where, you know, like against Jessica Cisneros when she was running against Henry Cuellar, India Walton for mayor of Buffalo. I mean, you guys are familiar with that thing they did to Nina Turner. They were doing it to Cenk, but Cenk also provided them with a very deep, rich vein of old sexist stuff to pull up from his past. This is sort of what builds the foundation of the Bernie Sanders sequence of the movie.
Unendorsement, yeah,
the unendorsement. And so like, I go out of my way, though, in the film, and so as we sort of like detail the steps of the union busting, sort of, we then rewind back to the origination of the campaign and sort of walk through the ethical promises that they made, then through kind of the way that they were smeared and lied about, because this movie's about media and power. And so it details, like, some of our leftist mafia favorites are in it, because there was all this attention on Cenk's campaign. You know, David Doyle, Humanist Report, is in it. Sahil Habibi plays a little role in it too. He shows up a couple of times. Sam Cedar, although not a leftist mafia, obviously, but he interviewed Cenk a few times. So I kind of did this very thorough look through the media surrounding the lies around Cenk that happened. The one that really jumped out was the New York Times smear, where they misrepresented something he said to David Duke in a very confrontational interview.
That was crazy.
It was crazy, yeah, and it deserved to be in the film, because it then contrasts. Kyle Kalinske made a huge stink about it. He led the charge to get a retraction and an apology. This is in the film called The Ethical Dark Web. That's the sequence I have for that. And that's a big deal, because later in the story, the story is about how Cenk then smeared his own workers publicly using his media platform, and the only person who called it out was me, right? Or because I knew. I mean, the union people pushed back too with their Twitter account, and IATSE helped, and a lot of people like raised their voices.
And before we get into that sequence, I just want to, for the audience, give a few parallel examples, right? Because Cenk Uygur, you might be able to be like, well, you know, a lot of people do this, right? Let me tell you a few examples of other people who evoke this strategy. For one, mainstream media all the time will make you wrapped up in an NDA. It's like one of the most classic, nefarious, hey, if you want to be able to eat after we've fired you, we're going to make you sign an NDA so that you cannot speak out against any wrongdoing. You might have a non-compete clause for a certain period of time, depending on what role you were using. We saw that Jimmy Dore himself also employed those non-disclosure agreements to, you know, subvert discontent amongst former employees, right? Poor treatment, you know, that kind of, you know, malpractice from a boss who is, again, making a living trying to, you know, purportedly, you know, make progressive causes better, right? Enrich the progressive policy conversation. Absolutely not doing that. And again, with the Jimmy Dore analogy, because the way that Cenk Uygur, excuse me, immediately tried to smear you guys, the way that he tried to immediately invalidate you as being an op of some sort, really reminds me of the way that Jimmy Dore handled the People's Party controversy. One of the original scoops that the Vanguard got was that the People's Party was a complete dogshit campaign. We got reached out to by a bunch of individuals who were like, hey, I actually really do believe in third-party movements. I tried really hard to work and organize. They're not doing this democratically. It's not a horizontal leadership structure. It's a way to funnel money to the Jimmy Dore show and enrich his friend Nick Brana and, you know, get more listeners and all this kind of stuff. And when people started to come and speak out against him, regular rank and file folks who really believed in the mission, really believed in having a party for and by the people, kind of like all of us do, right? he went on his platform with 1 million fucking subscribers and smeared them, and talked about how they had ties to our revolution, which they did not have, and talked about how maybe it was the deep state that got these people to really undermine Nick Branagh and the People's Party because they're so afraid of what's going to come when the people band together, yada yada yada. It is the exact same playbook. And then you kind of compare that to the Trumpian element, right? We oftentimes talk about how Jimmy Dore and Cenk Uygur both have a Trump streak to them, right? Manipulating people, not paying people, which I know Hank will get to later in this conversation, right? For work that they are justly owed. I just mean, you start looking at who your company is when you have these kinds of conversations. It's like, you guys aren't progressive champions. You guys are just raggedy old conservative Republicans that want to have a hip look to your predatory venture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, TYT was conceived in the mind of a Republican from the 90s who described himself as a liberal Republican, and then goes out of his way and makes the case that he hasn't really changed. Washington has changed. So it's essentially just like a Republican guy who was cool with gay people and hhigher taxes. And that's what you'd call progressive. That what?
I said it explains a lot if you kind of view it through that lens.
Yeah, right. Like, it was sort of born out of an ambitious, guy who wants to be a talk show host. I relate. I want to be a talk show. I do, I have a career. I get offended when people call Jimmy a failed comedian because I'm a failed comedian. I definitely didn't make it work.
When we say failed comedian, we mean like as far as actually being funny, not being successful in like a financial sense. He's definitely successful in a monetary sense.
Yeah. I performed at a show with Dave Rubin. That's a story I've always felt like would be fun to tell one of these days. Not that there's any much drama to it, but anyway. So I just totally lost my train of thought there. But the ambition to do a show and to like beat. So Cenk went to the Wharton School of Business at Penn State, same school as Donald Trump, Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's
they should be humiliated.
Holy shit!
Right, and it's like just Cenk's business acumen doesn't seem very strong when you look at the story. When you really get your head around like how like monumentally dumb and stupid it was to say no to this union, to like just torch your whole brand. But there's a deeper layer to that, which is I think that he would, I don't know for sure, but I think he preferred to be known as a union buster than as someone who uses classification to deny benefits to workers. And like he didn't want to he didn't want to have to answer the question, why did your workers unionize? So the lie, spreading this conspiracy nonsense that the union originated as a ploy by Nancy Pelosi to disrupt his campaign, it serves two purposes, right? So it stops his audience from asking. Yeah, exactly. It creates this cloud. It creates this obscurity. You don't have to be accurate. You just have to make sure people feel confused, right? And that worked incredibly well.
Just so people don't forget that was a very important point that you made that hit me like a ton of bricks. The fact that he was willing to be known as a union buster because otherwise he had to be known as the kind of guy that would exploit his part-time employees and use 1099 contractors and not give people health insurance and spit in the face of every value he'd ever espoused on camera as soon as it hit his bottom line, which is what every right-winger has ever said to his fucking face when they've debated. He basically validated every single one of his critics.
Well said. Well said, Zach. Your gift of gab came through in that moment. You did great there. You even ended it fairly efficiently, which is impressive. I also struggle with
occurrence if you tune into the Vanguard podcast. Just ask Gavin.
But whenever I stop talking, it's because I realize I've crossed over the line and I have about 100 more things I want to say. That's all true. I mean, that's just exactly it. So the union busting prevented this audience from asking, why did your workers unionize? Because that's a very normal question. They did it in secret. Well, what were they asking for? What was their problem? Why did they need to form a union? And the other thing it does is it justified the union busting. If he can say this union is a ploy, this is some kind of attack from the establishment, then I'm not union busting. I'm fighting Nancy Pelosi. I'm fighting my opponents. You get what I'm saying? Like, so it really worked, even though there was articles written at the time, and there was the NLRB case. Like, there's a ton of evidence, which I put out in that tweet. And I don't know if you guys want to play this at some point today, but like the caller that called Hansi, who's a caller to Matt Binder, I guess he used to call the Howards, but like he literally did what nobody in the progressive movement has done in 4 years. So shout out to Hansi for that, for calling him up and calling him out for being a union buster and asking him about that. And that's the first time Cenk has actually been put on the spot to say anything about this story. And he was incredibly dishonest when he answered that. As you talked about.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we kind of did a little bit of an edit where we put his words, his explanation up against the reality as it was described in a Politico article. It's very well sourced. It's not some smear. It's, it's a very good article that just explains what happened in that union drive. So it is interesting. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, Hank, there's a couple TYT defenders in chat, right? We get first. It seems like all of a sudden now TYT fans are also anti-union. I'm seeing a lot of anti-union talking points, in our own chat, which is pretty crazy because this is coming from people that claim to still be fans of the Young Turks. It seems like maybe it's not just Cenk and Anna that have experienced an ideological shift, but some people in their own audience as well, because this is wild. TYT, it's not some mom and pop donut shop on the side of the street that has 2 employees and it's owned by a 80-year-old woman or something. Like, I understand in a situation like that, or maybe you start a business and it's still really small and you're like, shit, I can't start a union. I have 1 employee and he's just helping me out here. This is not the situation at the Young Turks. This was not the situation at the Young Turks. Can you just talk about the size of the company and, how much views they were getting, what, sort of relevancy they were at the time when this union started? Because to me, it seems like if you're a company that was as big as TYT was at this point, then it's your responsibility to treat your workers correctly. If you don't have the money to do that, then what right do you have to be generating profit off of their labor? But can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. Right now, I believe that I've heard them say in the last year that they have about 75 employees. And I think when I was there, it was around 80 or so. I actually am recalling, as you're saying that, a clip I found because I was looking up stuff of Cenk doing the paid family leave case that he makes all the time, 84%. And he ran on it in his presidential thing. And I found an older clip of him talking about how he was for 6 weeks of maternity paid leave. This was like 2015, 14 or something. And so he's evolved to become now a 12-week maternity leave guy because, what a generous person. So at least he's improved on that front. But in that time, he said something about how companies, when we were starting out, we would have had a hard time doing leave, but we're over 50 employees. So I think for over 50 employees now, it's okay to do that. So like in his own words, I recall seeing him say that if you have more than 50 employees, you should be providing paid leave for people.
Yeah.
And
also,
so like,
does that 80 number include the 1099 contractors?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But, well, like in his union busting emails. So, Gavin, you mentioned the Politico piece, or sorry, which one of you did. And that one actually links to the union busting emails that Cenk sent. You can go read his own words in which he says in one of the paragraphs, something like nobody ever raised a single issue, and as if we're suddenly evil management that denies workers basics. And like, as I have just put up on my Substack, baldontheinside.substack.com, I raised issues. I have the email that I sent asking for help, asking for redress, and they were denying basics using multiple classifications on somebody, which is what motivated the union to wake up in 2019. So he's lying in those too. And at which point he then refers to him being a union buster, or as a boss who treats his workers poorly,
which is also something to reflect on. You mentioned that call in the caller angrily. What was the gentleman's name? I'm sorry.
Hansi.
So Hansi really fires Cenk up. He hangs up on him. He doesn't really have the energy to bat away any of the true things that Hansi's saying. He kind of just, that you could tell that the guy was a little nervous and a little fired up, and Cenk just used it as an opportunity to dismiss him. But then you could tell it really got under his skin. Gavin played a clip earlier in a few weeks ago, maybe when we put out that clip. And you can see him like have to go around the room on the TYT thing. And he's like looking around. He's like, "You're part of the union, aren't you? Oh, yeah, you're part of the union, aren't you, buddy? Oh, yeah, hey, this guy's over here. Yeah, you don't want to get fired, bro. Nod your head right now." You know what I mean? It was like
right.
Tony Soprano, like barking orders at the bada bing. You know what I mean? Like forcing people to be like, "You love your job, right? You're not unhappy. You swore an oath." You know what I mean? It's like, oh, yeah, go take out the garbage or fucking, have. Anyway, it really gave that kind of energy off. And it also... Yeah. Is a total lie because the Young Turks has a union in spite of Cenk Uygur, not because of Cenk Uygur.
Yes. I mean, that to me reveals what he thinks of his audience. That's gaslighting. I don't really go around using that term a lot, but I'm pretty sure that this is what gaslighting is. This is where you're redefining the definitions of the terminology. So he created this like closed loop circuit by saying that because we have a union, we couldn't have possibly busted a union. Therefore, I'm defining how my audience is expected to think about this thing, that's gaslighting. That's reorienting reality around your intention to deceive your audience and to make them believe something wrong. So he doesn't respect his audience just as much as he doesn't respect the people who work for him. You know, you don't respect people like making somebody come in to work part-time, calling them part-time while they're working 40 hours a week. That's not something you do to someone you respect. Like, so in how you responded.
That's what AMC did to me and Gavin over spring break when we were 18 years old, 16 years old. You know what I mean?
Send me their information. I'll put them in the documentary, those motherfuckers. Down with AMC.
Right. But you know what I mean? It's like never in a million years what you would expect from the home of progressive news.
Right. Like I was okay with low pay. I was okay with like kind of low respect. You know, generally it's not the most people don't feel all that respect. Like that was a big part of the drive, was just the feeling like you deserve to have more of a voice, more of a way to address grievances. Like kind of everybody's sort of used to little like small doses of respect on the whole. I didn't mind that. And they trade on the idea that they're an activist org. So you kind of get this notion that, well, it's not TV or commercial films. So that's like where pay is a lot better, you know, union rates, big union rates and stuff like
Ron
that.
wants everyone for you to, what was the hourly rate for an employee at the Young Turks?
First of all, shout out to Ron. Ron's helped me find a home for my kitty cat, by the way. But the hourly rate was $21.63.
In California, everybody.
Yeah. So for professional video editing, for television and internet distribution, because TYT does cable packages, you know, and so yeah, like, and I was the lowest paid editor. So I was making less per hour than every single other editor, and they were getting benefits and I wasn't. And if you think that's not a good reason to start a union, that after asking for, actually I'd started to try to, you know, to wake it up before I did the first meeting, but I was like, I'm not taking this. This is not cool. If there's a tool I have available, which is collective bargaining, I'm going to try to use it. Didn't know it would all spin up into this wildness with the election stuff, which is kind of like why I had to make this as a documentary, because I was in the middle of this really fascinating political story as a longtime political junkie and stuff. I wanted to tell this kind of interesting story. But yeah, 2163 is some pittance. And so like when I got days off that I didn't get paid, I was out $173.04 for that. You know, not that much money. That's a nice lunch for Cenk and one of his executive morons.
Do you want to talk a little bit, Hank, about the struggle and the process that you've been in trying to get your, you know, trying to get that money that you're owed, trying to get those benefits that you've been owed? Because I believe we actually talked one time off air, and obviously you don't need to share anything with the audience that you don't want to, but you told me in a pretty almost harrowing fashion the legal battle that you've been engaged in trying to get what you were owed. Do you want to talk about that at all?
I'd like to save much of that information for the documentary, for like the kind of bigger reveal there. But yeah, I mean, like totally there's a whole another element to the story that is just like, that really highlights the kind of difficulty workers have in achieving any kind of justice or sense of, I just wanted to come to work and do a good job and go home and deal with my mental health problems that I was dealing with. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't really looking for much more than that, because later I'd learned I was undiagnosed autistic, right? Like I've always had struggles and stuff. So like I was on this sort of like personal journey. I just wanted to do a good job because I'm really good at video editing, you know, like
really, yeah.
And like it felt like they were stealing. Like it genuinely felt like I was being robbed working there. If you mind shift your money, like what it means to earn money, like when you make money, does that not count as your money if you're doing the work and the benefits shouldn't go they're expected to be paid to you? Like just because you don't physically possess it before it gets stolen doesn't mean it's not being stolen from you. Of course, if you earn
you shouldn't even have to like explain that. Like it's like, do you guys see what I'm saying? I really deserve this money. You know, obviously, of course, all of us understand that. The only people that wouldn't understand that are people that are interested in exploiting you and stealing your labor and not paying you.
Yeah, I'll just say this: they made wage theft a felony in California in 2022. So like if you steal over $950, you could possibly face felony prosecution, which is kind of fun. As Cenk on the Haas stream once was going on about how, he's upset about people stealing and not going to prison. $950, and so like my 20 days off is $3,460. That's a lot of money.
Again, it's the exact same shit that everybody lampooned Donald Trump for. Oh, I had a private contractor come out and refinish Mar-a-Lago and redo the golf course. And, it cost them $800,000 to do it. And the bill was $1.2 million. And Donald Trump walks out there and says, here's $600,000. Oh, don't worry. My lawyer will make this a living nightmare for you if you fight it. He will fight you until you die. And I will spend thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars more than you could ever hope to afford before you ever catch up to me. I'll hide my money all over the world. That's the exact kind of tactics that Cenk Uygur would be employing if he had that kind of reach, just like Donald Trump. Let me say that again. Just like Donald Trump, the man that he fucking feeds himself lampooning every day.
Yep.
Right. And you pay a price for speaking out. This is going to hurt me in invisible ways for the rest of my life. So that's
absolutely. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, Hank. Let's take a look at another clip from your documentary before we continue the conversation and allow you the opportunity to talk a little bit about what's coming next as far as this documentary goes.
Okay.
Curious indeed. In mid-December, Anna had her own encounter.
So let's go ahead and try to intimidate Anna into accusing her of trying to dox people.
So for context, bad faith smears had been launched at her famous CEO friend during his political campaign, surprising no one.
They're gonna fight you.
Oh, okay.
Cenk least of all.
Come and see, get some. Okay, I'm not in danger. I am the danger.
They're gonna hate him, haha.
They're gonna hate me. And I welcome it.
Anticipating the attacks, Cenk outplays his opponents by addressing two of his vulnerabilities right away.
The Armenian genocide happened.
What was in those old blogs and why you apologized.
Ha! Try and set the narrative now, opponents.
Now Oppo research going crazy, trying to find, did he say the wrong word here? Did he say the wrong word there?
And he already had a major assist from Congressman Ro Khanna.
So absolute hero.
Plus the audience turned up with open wallets.
1,650 contributions. And we have 240 volunteers, and it hasn't been an hour yet. What now?
The plan was working.
And so I hope you'll have me back on, and I'm not kidding.
A few days later, on November 19th, The Hollywood Reporter hinted at the upcoming carnage. Past remarks from Cenk's youth would surely be brought to light. Many already were. But hey bro, no big. This wasn't the first time Cenk's words would land him in the hot seat. In 2017, he was booted from the Justice Democrats Political Action Committee, a group he helped found. He apologized. John Cusack from the iconic teen romp One Crazy Summer was there to push back.
I've known Cenk for years. He's always been a principled progressive advocating for social, racial, and environmental justice, actor John Cusack tells THR in an email.
The battle had been joined. Over the next few weeks, Nancy Pelosi would let slip the dogs of war upon the genocide denier turned genocide acceptor. Undeterred, Cenk forged ahead, buoyed by the support of the TYT Army and an assembly of loyal allies. Nina Turner joined Ro Khanna, both national co-chairs of the Bernie Sanders campaign, in endorsing him. Then, on December 12th, Cenk proudly announced he scored a huge endorsement from then presidential candidate and legendary hoopster, Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders endorsed me.
Senator and presidential candidate Bernie Sanders is now retracting his endorsement of California congressional candidate Cenk Uygur.
LOL, Cenk Uygur.
Basketball reverses.
It really is a bummer that even people I really do still to this day hold a lot of respect for, like Senator Nina Turner, like John Cusack, who I think has been a tremendous and stalwart advocate against the crimes against humanity we've all borne witness to in Palestine and the Gaza Strip. However, I imagine it has to feel like the entire weight of the world is against you, Hank, when you see, you've tried to raise this alarm. You've gone to court with the son of a bitch. You've raised every alarm. That's available to you at this progressive company. It's all falling on deaf ears. And this is years and years that have gone by. I feel like people are starting to wake up to this. This is something that Gavin and I have been trying to cover on our show for the last couple of years. And people are beginning to see through the charade. But yeah, I guess walk us through the self-talk at that point, right? How did you decide, you know what, I don't care about the odds. I don't care about all of this mountain of people who, you know, you have some level of respect for, maybe not at this point, right? What was that, what was that experience like?
Well, I was bullied in 7th grade, and I decided I wouldn't allow that to happen again. Just to give it, like, this felt like being bullied in a lot of, you know what I mean? Like I stood up. I had to stand up for myself. And the thing that kicked it off was Cenk making me sign the independent contractor agreement. If you're really like, that was the moment it was going to come out publicly at some point, because I just wasn't going to stand for that. I guess maybe had they done the right thing, I would have been okay with that. But anyway, to answer like more directly, I wasn't intending on doing like a full feature. I was kind of just, I had did a podcast about it in March of 2020. I waited until the negotiations were done because I didn't want to be putting stuff out, and that was a year and a half later. I did another podcast, and I realized I needed a shorter version. And while I was working on that, the NLRB notice showed up in my mailbox. That's this piece of paper right here, which I like to reveal. This hung on TYT's wall for 60 days. They're required to send to former employees. It even quotes management. There's Dave Kohler's signature. Like it, you know, this is well documented. Like this was at TYT. They were covering union stories about nefarious bosses doing stuff while walking past this to go to the studio. Didn't seem worthy of coverage. This shows up, and I'm like, well, this has to go in the film. And then I really realized the scope of it was that this thing really is about credibility and integrity and media and honesty and dignity, and it broaches a lot of topics that are well beyond just working at the Young Turks, that are just about spilling the tea. But a big part of it, just to get to the end of my multiple paragraph thinking here, is I have often felt, and I'm really excited that and grateful that you guys have wanted to get to know more about the story, because I often feel like this is just an enormous mistake, that I have just stepped into some big mess that I've caused for myself. And because I need more people to validate that this is worth making a stink about. You know what I mean? Like, because part of me is constantly just like, maybe you're just embarrassing yourself. Maybe you're just doing, because I'm definitely doing something that is pretty unusual. I don't think this happens much, especially to the degree of detail that
it's definitely unusual, Hank. And I think part of that is because you refuse to sign the NDA. You know, you're not shackled to their terms and their threats, and you're actually free to let people know about what's going on. And you know, whether or not it works out for you, man, I don't know. I don't know about the courts. I don't know about this stuff. What I do think, though, is invaluable, man. And again, I hope it works out for you personally, but what is invaluable is that you're providing an education, not only for our audience, but for everyone that watches the Young Turks, everyone who's ever believed a goddamn word that Cenk says. You're letting them know, hey, man, this is false advertising. Cenk is not a progressive boss. TYT is not a progressive company. And that is something that people deserve to know. It's not just juicy gossip. Obviously, we like to get into spilling the hot tea and all that stuff on the Vanguard, but this is like serious stuff. Like, people should actually know this, not just about TYT, but about the way that corporations work, about the way that bosses treat their employees, even at supposedly progressive companies. I mean, this just feeds into our larger critique of corporate capitalism that we've been talking about at the show, whether it's in the context of TYT or not. Obviously, the fact that it has to do with a show that everyone in our audience is aware of and probably at one point makes it a little bit more scandalous, of course. But I mean, I think what you're doing, Hank, is an absolutely invaluable public service, specifically to people that actually buy into TYT's bullshit.
Well, man, it means so much to hear you guys to hear that. I really appreciate it, because like I have this kind of righteous fury in me that drives this. I'm a bit of a pit bull. I don't let go of things that easily, clearly. And but you also have to get really deep in the weeds if you're going to present a story with some credibility. That's why I go out of my way to try to like show the justification for why they might have been suspicious of a union coming forward, and they could have rightfully said, we need a couple weeks to fact check this, and then we'll proceed with the union if it's a genuine effort from our workers. They could have done that. I would have been fine with that. They didn't do any fact checking. So like, there's a major breach of ethics, both on Kasparian's part and Cenk Uygur, in that sense, about checking with the sources of the knowledge. As I said in my piece, like, not all stories are confirmable, but very few stories are this confirmable. They weren't interested in telling their audience the truth, because the truth would have meant they would have had to talk about the reasons their workers unionized. And that would show that Cenk Uygur does not live his principles at all. You can't tell me that he believes what he says when you go work for the guy and he calls you part-time while you're working 40-hour weeks.
And this is something that I think is really revealing, given the evolution of the network that we have been discussing often on this podcast, right? Gavin and I have been doggedly, demonstrating how even over the last 4 years, they have moved demonstrably to the right. And I think it comes back to the fact that they do not have any ideological conviction. They do not actually care about uplifting their employees. They do not actually care about these progressive values. They do not actually care about any of it. What did Cenk see? An opportunity to make money. In 2015, he was like, holy shit, if we become the progressive network, we are going to revel in an untapped market. I'm going to buy a bigger house. I am going to be able to get outside investment, something that the Young Turks were desperate for, but hadn't yet achieved. And you can see this with Anna Kasparian talking about how she doesn't like homeless people, how she doesn't like being around seeing drug addicts out in Los Angeles. She doesn't want to be around trans people. She thinks it's a huge issue that she was called a birthing person on a form when none of us have ever seen that form. And for as much as she talks about it, she would have definitely made it public, right? So anyway, we've seen all of this, and it just comes back to a fact that they're not rooted in progressive values. Everything is a lie. It is a charade. It is pseudo-progressive politics to take your fucking dollars away from you. It's absolute horseshit. And, we're really sorry that you were caught up in the middle of this, Hank, but we're also tremendously grateful, as Gavin was saying, that you had the courage to do this, man, that you had the courage to be this relentless, that you had the courage to come on our show multiple times. And it's working, dude. The last time you came on our show, Gavin and I think you said we had 500 lives. Now we have 2,800 live viewers that are ready to hear your story, and probably 50,000 more tomorrow when we cut this into a clip. People are pissed. People know that the Young Turks wronged you and countless other people, and they're going to get their comeuppance, bro.
Yep. And I think it's also really important to do what you're doing, Hank. Again, even if you just remove everyone that we know, yourself, personalities, whatever. What happened when this story went public and people found out that TYT tried to bust their union, that Cenk was an attempted union buster? Guess what happened, man? It was really depressing. A bunch of freaking right-wing outlets like the Daily Wire and stuff like that. What did they do? They published articles saying, see, look, even the quote-unquote progressives are admitting unions aren't serious. They're not good for business. That's why Cenk, as a business owner, tried to bust his union. See, proof. Even the left is full of shit. And that's terrible for the left. That's terrible for the left, because we know that Cenk and Anna aren't real lefties. We know that they don't give a shit about their workers. We know they don't give a shit about workers' rights. Your story is proof of that. But a lot of people out there, to them, they do think of Cenk and Anna as being what an actual progressive looks like. They think of them as being the furthest left person out there in the Overton window of American discussion, right? So when they saw those articles, when they saw those headlines, and they see people like Ben Shapiro saying, see, we told you, unions aren't serious. Even TYT tried to bust theirs because they know how bad it is for business. It's just such a bad look for the left, and it blows my mind. It kills me that Cenk couldn't have just said, you know what? I will sacrifice a couple extra dollars to make this fucking point, to live our values, to walk the walk that we talk, and to actually set an example. Hey, look, a progressive company can not just survive, but flourish while taking care of its workers. A progressive company can take care of the people that make this show possible, pay them properly, compensate them, and not only will we survive, but it'll actually make the show better. We all know that when workers are happy somewhere, they're going to work harder. They're going to, care more about doing a good job for the people that they're working for. This all seems obvious to me, and it's just such a missed opportunity that Cenk and TYT had to go the way that they did. And of course, people like you get caught up in it, and now you're having to deal with this all these years later. It's really a messed up situation, man. But really do appreciate you, doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and appreciate you coming on the show today. I did want to give you the floor a little bit. You mentioned that there was going to be an effort to kind of collectively fundraise, right? For people who don't know, I have gotten to see this as the one layman that gets to see the art form of editing up close. I'm terrible at it. I don't like editing. I can do it, but it's really choppy, and I normally just cut out all of the other bullshit and then, whatever, right? Gavin, Hank, these guys are artists. They take a real pride in it, and they will sit there for fucking hours just like, and I'm like, they're like, yeah, bro, be really fun when we smoke a bowl and go for a walk after this. But I hear you. This is important, right? You know, so I'm like standing there like I'm like the kicker, you know, like I have an important job when the time comes. But outside of that, like, you know what I mean? Anyway, it's real hard work. I've gotten to watch it. That shit ain't free. Hours aren't free. How can people support you, and how can people get, you know, the message out on your behalf?
Well, man, yes, absolutely. You're not wrong. Editing is just mostly just sitting still while the cartilage in your wrists goes bad. That's essentially all it. Yeah, and I have at least 20 years experience, although I feel like I have a 40 years experience total. Yeah, so I would love some support on patreon.com. I have links in my videos of other donation links. I'm struggling currently. I wrecked my wrists actually at a woodworking job, so I'm not able to like use my hands fully. I can still video edit and stuff, and I'm kind of running low on funds and having a difficult time with that. I talk about this a lot in my podcast, Winners and Losers. Please check it out. The latest one actually is like a 3-hour. I just didn't realize how long I was talking, but I go through a whole bunch of TYT stuff. So if people want to go give that a look, that would, you know, bump my numbers up. But you know, just the usual thing. I'm probably going to formalize a GoFundMe. I think I haven't done that. I'd love to find partners or somebody that wants to help with that, who has experience. I think that this whole project has a much bigger chance of reaching some bigger heights if I can kind of like build out the squad here for me. You know, I'm a little overwhelmed. I'm feeling pretty beat up in life. Didn't know I was autistic till 2 years ago when at age 42. So like late identified autism is it's a long journey to get to that point. And so I'm in some sort of burnout. My energy's all over the place. I'm rambling here. But yeah, and I just wanted to like summarize the whole story into like 3 buckets of like ethical violations, just so it's really clear. Like the one ethical violation is the union busting itself. That's something I'm making us think about. The other ethical violation is is lying to their audience about the origination of the union. They didn't do any fact checking, and they had a responsibility not to smear and attack their own workers for trying to start a union. And the third ethical violation is the my working conditions, is that, you know, employing somebody to you know, deprive them of $8,000 to $12,000 of income while they're working full-time video editing at your video production company is, in my opinion, an ethical violation that should be called out. It's not just because of the low pay. I wouldn't make a documentary and be like, "Man, it was only $21." Like, okay, that would have been just complaining, you know. But because you're supposed to not fucking. Are we here to just take it from these fucking people or not? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're supposed to stand up to power. We're supposed to call people out. And if you help me with this project, sorry, I'm starting to get going here. If enough people turn up and rally to my side, we could hold the capitalist accountable. You know how rare that is, how rare an opportunity that is. You know how few of Cenk's contemporaries, his other union busting ghouls that he aspires to live alongside and be with. Do you know how few of them ever face any accountability? And all we have to do to hold Cenk accountable for this bullshit is be honest. And I just need people's help spreading the word. Obviously, money helps. I do like a whole bunch of other stuff. I'm going to start doing more video game things on my other YouTube channel, Suck Professor. I did that for a long time. I've had a bunch of stuff. I'd like to move on to other stuff. And sorry, finally wrap up. Zach said Michael Moore earlier, and that made my heart sing, man. Because like my dream is that in 10 years, people say, "Oh yeah, there's those like really great corporate call out films like Roger and Me, Tell the Truth, Cenk." Something, you know what I mean? Like, I would be so privileged to like, and not that I think I'm the next Michael Moore. I think I'm actually very funnier and balder than he is. So, but like, that's sort of my hope is that I can actually convert somehow into more work and working on other projects and doing other things and maybe making more films in a more professional, sort of straightforward manner with funding. Because I've financed this with a workers' comp payout and with rent debt, and I'm on the verge of moving home to Illinois because I'm out of money. So please support. Well, thank you guys.
Absolutely. We really hope everybody listening right now, check out Hank's documentary. Help him out if you can. Hank, thank you so much for fighting the good fight and dropping at the show today.
Yeah.
You know, we'll continue to blast this message out on your behalf.
Yep.
Check out baldontheinside.substack.com. That's got a whole bunch of receipts. That's where the proof is right now.
And you said the first 2 pieces of the doc are out now. Oh, working on the third one. Eventually, it might all come together in an Exodia fashion to create a final piece.
Exodia. Jeez, that's a you better be getting laid for using that word. Exodia. My God, I don't even know what it means. You just totally mesmerized me. Yes, there's two. Why am I doing weird hand motions? There's two pieces up. That's like 84 minutes of the footage. It's very close to finished, but there's another third. I need to like then Exodia into the other two and then make like this one single final version. And that would be kind of fun to do, like a premiere and like a launch party. I have these dreams of doing like screenings where then we have Q&As with the audience. You know, that might be fun. Whatever, you know, maybe there's more ways to like get the word out with this whole thing, but I need help doing that. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely make sure to let us know as you roll out that next piece of the film, what we can do to help promote it. Obviously, you'll come back on when that happens to share some more details and to play some more of the work.
Have a good one, man.
For sure. Bye, everybody. I'll see y'all in the chat. I'll be saying dumb things in there.
Sweet. Peace out, bro. All right. That was an awesome conversation. Super grateful that Hank took the time to come and join us and kind of walk us through that documentary. Very well edited documentary. Editing is work.
Hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. I really do. It's an important story. Hank, you know, he's a fact-based guy. Yes, he's been through a lot of personal turmoil as it relates to this whole situation. But if you watch his documentary, it's not just like the manifesto of some disgruntled ex-employee of a company. No, he breaks down specifics, facts, receipts over and over again to a pretty undeniable point. And again, some people in chat, they're like, you know, why do you care so much about Cenk and Anna? Why are you so invested in purity testing? I'm not. I don't give a shit. You guys can watch TYT. If anyone's in our chat who's a TYT super fan, go for it. Keep watching. I don't care, man. You can do whatever you want. You can watch whatever you want. But I do think it's important that you know when you watch TYT and then when you click on one of their videos and when you hear Cenk running his mouth about how much he supports workers' rights, yeah, I do think it's important that you guys know that. And again, I'm not telling you to stop watching TYT. It's probably better you watch TYT than a lot of other media companies, Fox News, CNN. I mean, yeah, sure. It's definitely not the worst out there. But I do think it's really important to understand that context.